Hey everyone. Today I'm going to be going through some best practices as you start working in Rhino a little bit more often. A lot of these will transition nicely into your Adobe programs as well. So hopefully this will help you kind of avoid some sticky situations as your models become more complex. And yeah, help you move forward as you start to model for rendering, other visual representation, as well as like prototyping, 3D printing, things like that. So I just have this old model open, and I haven't opened it in a long time, so we'll kind of see what's going on in here. Hopefully I have followed my own best practices, but if not, I think there'll be some good examples in here of what not to do too. So the first thing that you want to do when you're modeling is make sure that you're modeling in the correct units. So in Rhino, you can just type in units to check out which ones you've got. I've set them to meters, which I think is what my dimensions were for the drawings that I was working off of. This is able to be changed later on. So if you end up working in units and you want to switch them later because you've been using the wrong ones, that is possible. So let's say that like I actually wanted it to be in millimeters. And it'll ask you if you want to scale your model. So basically what that means is like, do you want to keep it the actual size that it is right now? Or do you want to scale it so that if this is 10 meters across, it stays 10 millimeters across? That's kind of what it's asking you. So yeah, you can always change them later if you need to. I would also recommend for naming conventions that you are kind of sticking to the same convention in all of your projects. That'll make it easier when you are going back to old projects to check out, what you're actually modeling. So in addition to that, saving multiple versions is always a good idea. I think I modeled this house in like 2 days, so I didn't actually end up saving versions, but typically, especially if I'm going through the design process, I will. So maybe I'll just open up kind of a good example here. Okay, so this is a shared file that I was working with a partner on last year, and so it was really important as we were going through the semester to keep all of our work really organized as we were working on things and passing the file back and forth. So you can see we're using the date here, 2020, January 28th. And then we had the same convention for pretty much all of our files. So we were using site 11 and then whatever assignment we were on, part B, part C, or whatever. And then we would often put our initials at the end as well to show who was the last person who worked on it. Like here you can see part C, KS. And so this is good to establish kind of when you start working on a project, either alone or with a partner, just to make sure you're on the same page about naming things. I did talk about saving versions, but I do think that's really important. I typically save a new version of a model every time I open it. So, once or twice a day I'm saving a new version. And that means that if you make any big changes, you can always go back and revert it back to the way that it was before. This is especially important if you're actually doing a design project where you're going through different iterations. Sometimes you might kind of get rid of something and then try something new, and you might want to go back to the way it was before. So saving versions can really kind of help you out. Your autosave should be automatically set up in Rhino, but if it's not, autosave is always a good thing to take advantage of. Of course, if Rhino crashes or something, it's nice to have your backup there. And then layer management is also kind of, I like to say, the key to happiness when you're modeling or even using Photoshop Illustrator. I was a bit afraid, I'm not going to lie, because I couldn't remember what my layer management was like in this file, but it looks pretty good. So the thing that I like to do when I start modeling something new is to just create a bunch of layers that I know I'm going to need. So it looks like I've kind of separated them here into the different components of the house. And then I always have one layer, usually with some sub-layers, for all of my 2D drawing. So here you can see I've kind of separated them into the elevations and the plans. And this is super important to keep all of your 2D work. A lot of times you'll have a bunch of 2D drawing and then you'll be extruding and things to create the 3D forms. And just like saving versions, sometimes you'll want to go back and try something new. And so it's really important that you still have those same curves and two-dimensional line work. So I always just throw them kind of on their own layer. To that point, I will say keep everything and keep it accessible. I typically like to avoid using the hide command, just because then you can't see what's actually hidden. Whereas if you keep things in layers, you can easily just turn them off so you don't have to look at them. But then at least I have this menu here and I know exactly what is present in my model. And I can always turn them back on to see. And then also, I have a note written down here that just says modeling cleanly. Depending on what you're working on, that can mean different things. So basically it just means like do good modeling from the start. Sometimes you'll kind of get lazy and not make things, line up well, or you might skip steps thinking you can go back and fix it later if you need to. And if you don't go back and fix them, you can run into problems when you get into things like rendering, 3D printing, things like that. So maybe I'll pull up some examples because I know I'll have some. Get rid of interior and exterior walls. So in this, let's look at this. So I've got this beam running through the house and it's kind of intersecting these flooring pieces. Obviously that wouldn't happen in real life, so that could be fixed. I've got some other intersecting objects. These stairs are made of a material that I've just left them as two-dimensional planes, so they aren't actually a three-dimensional material. And then I think when I put the interior walls on them, it just became a solid object. So just things like that, try to avoid as much as possible. Again, this is just kind of a fun personal project, so I wasn't super concerned about having a super clean model, but it will help you in the long run. First of all, if you know how to model cleanly, and then if you're actively doing it, because you kind of never know where your projects are gonna come out, and it's much easier to model cleanly at the beginning rather than going back and trying to fix things after. I really like using the command show edges to just kind of check how I'm doing periodically. So you can either see all of your edges or you can see naked edges. So naked edges basically just mean if there is a plane or a curve that it's not a solid, it's not joined to anything. And they'll all kind of highlight in this fuchsia color. So it makes it really obvious when you have been not modeling cleanly, which you can see I have not been doing in this model. So you can always go in and kind of check out where things are missing, and retroactively fix them as you're going along. And then the last thing I'll say about best practices is just to always save to two separate places. This is a no-brainer, but still I have seen a lot of people be very sad the day before a pinup or a critique because their computer crashed and they lost all their files. So I always save things to Google Drive as well as to my computer. But obviously if you have an external hard drive, that's good too. Just making sure that you're kind of setting yourself up for success when, knock on wood, your computer may or may not crash at some point in the next few years. So that's all I've got for best practices. If you have any other tips, be sure to throw them in the Miro or the Canvas and we can kind of start a discussion. But hopefully those will get you set up for success in your first few models.